Greetings and salutations, my friends. My name is Travis, aka Dad, and welcome to Dad Does Tech. I'm just an ordinary dad who loves tech and camera stuff, and my job is to help make your life easier so you buy the right gear and get the most out of it. And today we are looking at the Canon M50, and we're going to put all our hopes and dreams together and take a look at what we hope the Canon M50 Mark II or the Canon M60, whatever they're going to call it, is going to look like. Either way, it's going to be the successor to this very popular Canon M50, and we're going to dive into why that is and what we hope to get out of the next one. The Canon M50 is undoubtedly one of Canon's most popular cameras over the last few years. Now, while the Canon M50 is a good camera here in 2020 and it still competes, somebody's knocking, and it's the Mark II. All the leaks point to the Canon Mark II being right around the corner with either an announcement in Q4 of 2020 or even a release. Honestly, I think it's highly plausible that we could see the Canon M50 Mark II for the holiday season in November or December. The first thing we're going to talk about is the suspected processor that this camera will have. It's rumored that the Canon M50 Mark II will actually use the same Digic 8 processor. I'm not sure if that's going to be true or not. I guess we'll just have to wait and see, but it's possible there is a chance that they use the Digic 10, which is the same processor that they used in the 1DX Mark III, and that would boast a huge performance upgrade. I would say that that upgrade may be slightly unlikely at this point, just because I think that the upgrade in the processor would definitely increase the price and push them a little bit closer to cannibalizing their M6, which is currently running the Digic 8 just like the old M50 is. So even if they use the Digic 8 processor again, there's a really good chance that they'll find a way to squeeze more performance out of that processor. I've got to say, there is one giant elephant in the room that we got to talk about in hopes that the Mark II is going to do something different, and that is 4K video on the Canon M50. The 4K footage had a comically ridiculous crop. It's 1.6 already being a crop sensor camera. So whatever your lens is, you have to multiply that focal length by 1.6. You put it in 4K mode, and all of a sudden your video is 1.6 crop times 1.6 crop. Essentially, your nifty 50mm camera lens just became a 128mm macro lens, or your 16mm prime just became a 41mm prime. I don't know about you, but I can't think of very many situations where I would want my 16mm wide-angle lens to look more like 50mm, because the purpose of a wide-angle lens is to try and get a wide angle. But wait, there's more. The Canon M50 4K footage also doesn't support dual pixel autofocus. In 4K, you get switched to this contrast-based autofocus, which is okay if you are in daylight, but the second you get in a studio setup like this where the lights are a little bit lower or anything else where if it's not optimal lighting conditions, all of a sudden this thing is hunting like crazy and it's never in focus. Now, even though the 4K footage on the Canon M50 right now is a major buzzkill, there is hope for the Mark II. The Canon EOS M6 already supports 4K uncropped footage and dual pixel autofocus while rocking the same Digic 8 processor as the current M50. That gives me a lot of hope for the second generation of the M50 that it'll have dual pixel autofocus on 4K with no crop. Yes! While I wouldn't expect to see Canon make the same mistake with the 4K footage that they did on the Canon M50, it is worth noting that Canon does have a history of handicapping their cameras and making some strange decisions that make their cameras kind of difficult to use in certain situations, and sometimes those things are deal breakers. All I'm saying is that Canon has a track record for this kind of stuff, so it's kind of a cross your fingers, a hope and a prayer that any handicaps that could appear on the Canon M50 Mark II are just not that bad. I think a natural segue from 4K video is frame rates, so let's talk about what we should expect with the Canon M50 Mark II. One of the things that we've come to notice about DSLRs and mirrorless cameras that shoot video is that the maximum frame rate that you get in your highest resolution, which in this case will likely be 4K, the highest frame rate that you get in 4K, the frame rate for 1080p or whatever the step below it is usually doubled as your maximum frame rate. So for example, the maximum frame rate in 4K on the original Canon M50 was 30 frames per second. And then in 1080p, it was double that, it was 60 frames per second. And then the Canon M50 also had the ability to shoot in 720p all the way up to 120 frames per second, which was super cool because you could get that uber slow motion. However, when you drop from 1080p to 720p, when you're trying to do the 120 frames per second, yeah, the footage is super smooth and slow, but the quality and the resolution, you can just tell that it's not as crispy and clean. So in the Mark II, I'm really hoping to see 4K 60, 1080p 120 frames per second, and then I don't think it'll really matter at this point, but 720p 240 would be kind of cool if they have a super fast setting that they can achieve in the menu system. That would be pretty cool. But I think for the average user, whether you're entry level, intermediate, or advanced, all we really want is a camera that we can take with us that shoots 4K 60 uncropped with audio and your dual pixel autofocus from Canon. Come on, boys. This camera's gonna sell itself. Another big gripe from Canon M50 users is definitely battery life. The Canon M50 uses LPE 12 batteries that are only rated for 235 shots on the Canon M50, which is not very many. If you compare it to other cameras in a similar price range from Canon, namely DSLRs, you'll see that those cameras are using LPE 17 batteries, and those batteries on those cameras are getting almost 3 times as many shots on a single charge as the Canon M50 on the LPE 12. And I think that that's something that's gonna just have to change in the Canon M50 Mark II. People are not going to want to buy a camera that they have to have 20 batteries in their pockets just to get through a shoot. Maybe they'll even find a way to upgrade to those Canon LPE 17 batteries that the DSLRs were using, and that would be fantastic because that's going to be a huge boost in performance right away. Perhaps one of the most widely spread rumors about the Canon M50 Mark II is gotta be the inclusion of in-body image stabilization, or IBIS. Canon just released the EOS R5 and the R6 with in-body image stabilization for the very first time, so there's a lot of talk about whether that's gonna be coming to the EOS M line, and rumors are saying that it is potentially coming to one camera this year. The thing is that there are 2 cameras coming this fall or in early 2021, the Canon M50 and Canon's new flagship camera in the EOS M line, the Canon EOS M7. And I think it's much more likely that Canon will put in-body image stabilization in the Canon EOS M7 versus the Canon M50. And for those of you who don't know what IBIS is, there are 3 different types of stabilization for cameras. There's IS, which is stabilization on a lens. There's EIS, which is a digital stabilization that Canon does to try and shake out the shimmy in your footage digitally, but often causes some warping and what they call a jello or rolling shutter effect in video. And then there's IBIS, which is in-body image stabilization. And what that means is the sensor itself behind the lens actually moves up and down with the camera so that it can help accommodate some of that shake and take it out of your footage for you. And since Canon is just now rolling that out and it's on cameras well over $2,000, it seems unlikely that Canon would put it in the M50 given that it's an entry-level mirrorless camera. Now there is one more upgrade that I'm really hopeful to see on the Mark II. That would be the ability to have clean HDMI out. The ability to get clean HDMI out of the Canon M50 Mark II would allow people to use their camera for live streams and be able to get full 1080p and 4K footage with autofocus, and right now that's just not something that's available on the original Canon M50. There are some workarounds to use the original M50 for live streaming, but they're going to require you to either buy paid software or you're going to have to use the EOS utilities software from Canon, and it's going to require you to film at a lower resolution. Either way, whether you're using the utilities software or paid software, there's going to be limitations. Oh snap, my lights back here just turned off. Okay, I don't know what's going on with that, but that's not working. What is the cost of this camera? My guess is that it's going to cost probably somewhere between $700 and $750. My hope is that they'll try and keep it closer to $700 for the body and $850 to $900 for the full kit with a lens. If they price it too much higher than that, then it's going to start to eat into the sales and make it too close to the Canon EOS M6. And if they price it too much lower than that, then it's going to start to interfere with the Canon M50 Mark I, which they're going to continue to sell. Because they're going to continue to sell the Canon M50 Mark I, you may be asking yourself right now, should I get the Mark I or should I wait until the M50 Mark II comes out, whether that be in the fall of 2020 or early 2021? If the camera is the one thing preventing you from being able to start creating things, whether it's for YouTube or otherwise, or taking photos, then you should start getting the Mark I immediately. I don't think you should wait. I think the Canon M50 Mark I is still an excellent camera even in 2020. That being said, the camera you have is always better than the one you don't. So if you have one, whether it be a smartphone even or an older camera, and it's sufficient for creating content, I think you should probably save your money and get the Mark II when it comes out and just start making content now with what you have. But if the camera is the one thing holding you back, pull the trigger on the Mark I. I don't think you'll be disappointed. Based on all the information and all the leaks that we have seen today, these seem like the most realistic expectations for the Canon M50 Mark II. I'm personally super pumped for this camera. Are there other features that you think that this camera could have or that you'd like to see implemented in the Mark II generation? Let me know down in the comments below. Alright guys, that's going to do it for this video. If you liked it, found it helpful or mildly amusing, please give it a big thumbs up. It really helps out the channel. Please subscribe for more videos just like this and let me know what kind of videos you want to see in the future down in the comments below. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Later. Now while the Canon M50 is still a Groot. I am Groot. Oh boy. Given all the recent leaks and all the information that we currently have on the Canon M50, do not buy that camera. That sounds like a major knockoff. And dual pixel autofocus. Hocus pocus autofocus.